Today's video is yet another grammar lesson. You guys asked for one and I delivered. We're gonna learn how to use the 3 types of conditionals in English. So if your English is at an intermediate or upper intermediate level, this is the video for you. But before we get into it, I'm Dasha, and on this channel I teach English and give you tips on how to improve it. So consider subscribing if you want to take your English to the next level. Now let's get into it. Conditionals describe the result of a certain condition. They're used to speculate about what could happen, what might have happened, and what we wish could happen. We therefore have an if clause that tells you the condition and the main clause that tells you the result. So if you study English, you will pass your IELTS. Here the if clause is if you study English, which if satisfied, you will pass your IELTS, which is the result. In English, there are 5 conditionals: the 0, first, second, third, and mixed type conditional. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to look at the first 3 and briefly touch upon the third and mixed type of conditional. You can think of the 0, first, and second conditional in the following way. 0 means that something is a fact and therefore 100% true. The first means that something is probably true, and the second conditional describes a situation that is very unlikely to be true. So let's first look into the 0 conditional. We use it with what are called general truths and facts. It's the most simple of all the types of conditionals. For example, if you over-exercise, you'll get tired. It's a scientific fact that exercising a lot will fatigue your body. And since it's a fact, you can use the 0 conditional. The 0 conditional therefore follows the following structure: if or when plus present simple, which is the if clause, and present simple, which is the result. In another example, you could say, when it rains, the roads become slippery and wet. What about the first conditional? Like I said a moment ago, the first conditional describes something that will probably happen. And so we use it when talking about future situations or events that will very likely happen. So if I see my boss tomorrow at the office, I'll ask her for a raise. Or the classic, if it doesn't rain tomorrow, we'll go to the beach. As you can see, when using the first conditional, we will have the if clause, which consists of if or when, plus the present simple, and the main clause, which contains will plus the infinitive. Again, fairly straightforward. Let's take a look at another example. If I go to the gym tomorrow, I will wash my hair. And now the second conditional, which is quite tricky. It's tricky because we use it when something isn't likely to happen. In other words, it describes a situation that's totally different from reality. Here, you'll use if plus the past simple and would plus the infinitive. For instance, if I won the lottery, I would quit my job. Well, I clearly didn't win the lottery, and there's more chances to get struck by lightning than me actually winning the lottery. So this is clearly something that's not going to be true. In another example, you could say, if I had the money, I would buy a house. Here, you don't have the money to buy a house. And so the second conditional is appropriate. And now let's turn to the third conditional real quick. And yes, it's more complicated than the second. That's because it describes something that did not happen, but could have happened had the right conditions been met. Like, remember that time when you failed that chemistry exam because you didn't study? You can't just turn back the clocks and redo it. It's all over. You failed it. An English teacher once told me that this is the time machine condition. That's because the third conditional is used when you're looking back at a past event and you're imagining all the ways you could have changed the outcome. And here you're going to use if plus past perfect and would plus have plus past participle. And so if you had studied for your chemistry exam, you wouldn't have failed. Let's look at a few other examples. If I had gone to medical school, I would have become a doctor. This is of course a fantasy because I actually went to law school and not medical school. But had I gone to medical school, I would have become a doctor. Alternatively, you could say, if I had asked for that promotion, I would be earning more money. And now let's have a look at the mixed type conditional. All you need to remember here is that mixed conditionals are used to talk about the present and the past in the same sentence. That's why they're called mixed conditionals. We use it to refer a time in the past and a situation that is still taking place in the present. It's called a mixed conditional because the tense in the main clause is different from the tense in the if clause. For instance, if I were you, I would get the iPhone 11 instead of the iPhone 12. Or if I weren't going on holiday next week, I would have attended your baby shower. And so you can use the mixed conditional when talking about future and present events. Like, if I weren't going to work tomorrow, I'd be making YouTube videos. My tip for you would be to learn the 0, first, and second conditional very well before diving into understanding the third and mixed conditionals, because you will get confused. And in case you were wondering how do we use the commas when talking about the conditional, very simply, we use a comma after the conditional clause when it comes first. The conditional clause being the if clause. So if you were to take the sentence, if I had studied harder, I wouldn't have failed my exam, you'll see that the comma comes after the if clause. You could switch the sentence around and it will still be completely correct. But you need to remove the comma and say, I wouldn't have failed my exam if I had studied harder. And that's it for me today. I hope that you found today's lesson useful. Feel free to drop me a comment with your questions and example sentences, and I'll be more than happy to check them out and give you my feedback. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.